Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to The Human Advocate. I am the Human Advocate, an advocate for humans and for you. And today, I just, didn't really have much, but I did see, I was kind of interested in what do people think of American culture? Like, what is American culture? When a lot of people think about what American culture is, you get from a lot of people that American culture is nothing, or it's not something worth discussing, or it's just everything else in the entire world. And I don't agree. I'm not sure. I don't agree with that. So I was just gonna look through a couple of videos, maybe just various videos, and just see at different time periods, like maybe more recently, and then more a couple of years ago, and then depending on views, just kind of what people have thought and what people have popularized as what is the idea of American culture. Have they denigrated it? Has it been good? Has it just been totally, globalized? I mean, I think it's a very interesting question, and if we want to discover what America is and where we are going, we have to have a solid cultural foundation. And I think that's important. So, with that being said, I'm just going to switch right on over here to this. And let's just, I did start watching it, but I want to start from the beginning, just if there's any thoughts.
In my case, America Junior, it is easy to... So, when you live in America, or in my case, America Junior, it is easy to assume that every country in the world has a more interesting culture than your own. A lot of Americans are very interested in the cultures of Asia and Europe, for instance, because those cultures seem so much more rich and authentic, and I totally get it. I mean, I've been pretty fascinated with Japanese culture for a while now. I particularly like decoding all of the little cultural references. And
I mean, I'll say, as someone who started out, I guess their cultural journey, what really fascinated me was, Japan. Anime, video games, all those things. Like, what made me interested was, what is it that makes someone have these values and have these things where they decide it's important to showcase them in a cultural medium that is, has a good storytelling and character development and all these kinds of things that we're just, we're becoming more and more absent as time went on. So I think it was, it was a really interesting time. I mean, back in, I want to say 2008, about when I started watching Adult Swim. I mean, even before that, Dragon Ball Z and all those other kinds of things. But, I was really interested in Japan, and obviously, American culture. I like American history, but it was certainly more fascinating to me to look at Japanese culture, even more so than European culture. But there are things that attracted me to that, and the reason I was attracted to it was because it was so prominent, it was so put out there on the stage for everyone to see on television and video games and entertainment mediums. If we look at the idea of American culture, why is it not seen as something important or good? It's because no one is out there professing to have an American culture. When you have these anti-culturalists and they say that America has no culture because it's just a conglomeration of everything else, well, you've never set out to actually develop a culture. Cultures don't just arise from the ether, and they are enforced by yourself, by your families, by your communities, everything else that goes along with that. And if a culture is not enforced and it is not reinforced through television mediums, entertainment, through video games, through books, through music, then you lose, of course, a cultural identity. It becomes whatever is the dominant cultural force at the time. And for a lot of people, that was certainly Japan, especially for me growing up. There was certainly a lot of my my colleagues and people that were with me in school that were really interested in Japan and really wanted to, emulate that. So but we didn't have, there wasn't a cultural balance, a counterbalance to that either. There wasn't like a professing of like America. Like it was still like kind of the after Bush era. And this was just, 2008. So right after Obama. So we hadn't quite gone down the path of let's denigrate what is the American experience. But there wasn't, I guess, much to be proud of with all the protests and anti-war stuff that was going on in the United States following 9/11. And you probably could trace a lot of American decline back to that whole event. But culturally, I think we started to lose ourselves on the world stage because we looked at ourselves introspectively through the Obama years, and we started to denigrate ourselves because there was some higher global goal that we were supposed to be pursuing. So I think that's, it's an important aspect to look at. But again, cultural identity is reinforced and enforced by the people that it surrounds it and propagates it. People on their own, are not going to just form a culture if the media, if all of the things that would normally enforce it actively discriminate against it or say it doesn't exist in the first place. So there's definitely a top-down component to culture as well. And if the government and the media and all those things thought that American culture is not even worth talking about in the first place, and you have to wonder why they would think it's not important to talk about, because maybe if they don't have a culture, well, maybe it's a lot easier to control people. Maybe it's a lot easier to just say, this is what your culture is, and you're going to work forever, and that's your culture now. And you don't get to tell me what it is anymore because I've already given you your culture, and you have nothing to compare it to. So, I think it's a good point. So that's my opening thing.
The reason why American entertainment can sometimes seem a little bit culturally bland these days is because so much of American pop culture is now being designed with global audiences in mind. And what this means is that there is a lot of pressure on American content creators these days to sort of tone down the American cultural references in their TV shows or movies or games or whatever, so that they're...
And you have to be like, well, why would they want to do that? What is the objective here if we don't want to proclaim and profess that America is as good as it can be? What is the reasoning behind that? And I think you will find a majority of the time that the reason behind it is in service of a profit motive, in service of a motive that is to make more money, not to profess a happiness of more people around the world. It's to entertain and to distract and to not give anything of substance, just to put things that are kind of like, yeah, okay, but you can glom onto and just throw your own self onto them. You're not enforcing anything. And certainly with like a lot of the recent entertainment decisions in media and movies especially, it's become, if you go look at any critical drinker video, honestly, you can just look at all of the points where they have a culture that they want to profess, but it's not an American culture. It's not an American culture. It's decidedly a tyrannical, like, you have to behave in this way. And American culture, I don't think necessarily professes that. I think it says, we live a pretty good life, and we're pretty great and awesome, but nothing says that you have to actually go down that road or that route if you don't want to. So I think that's just as valid.
They're not too exotic or confusing to consumers in foreign lands. This is a big reason why modern Hollywood makes so much action fantasy type stuff. This kind of thing tends to be the least grounded in American culture,
yes,
and is thus the easiest to export to other places. Pop culture from, say, France.
Right. If you look at posters like the Star Wars poster with I think it was John Boyega, who was, obviously, he's black, and he was not put on the Star Wars poster in China. Why? Because it's easier to sell in China than it would be to enforce that there is a character here that is pivotal. And if you as a studio are going to remove a character from your poster, what kind of faith or investment do you have in your own material that you're professing that you think is a creative vision if all it takes for you to sell it is just to remove a character? Like, that's anti-human. That's awful. I mean, if you're going to have a character on a poster, it should be a non-negotiable. That's the central theme of your poster. That's the central theme of whatever your film or your movie or your production is about. And if you can just as easily take it out of there without it even being a second thought, then it wasn't even meant to be anything in the first place.
Doesn't really have this problem because French creators just assume that their stuff isn't going to be seen by anyone other than other French people. Anyway, today I just wanted to do a fun little video in which I offer my personal salute to a couple of TV shows and games and songs that are just unapologetically crammed with American culture. A couple of works that I have always appreciated, both as someone who likes good content and also is a big fan of the many things that make America, America. They are all comedy-based, which isn't a coincidence. Comedy tends to be one of the most culturally particular genres of entertainment.
I think that is kind of true, actually. I mean, look at Sam Hyde. I mean, honestly, as popular as he is, as popular as Dave Chappelle is, as popular as many of American comedians are. And the reason, again, I think I've said this before, but comedy is so successful is because it has an element of truth-telling. And in most societies, you just can't do that. It's just culturally insensitive to tell the truth about things. Americans as a society, I think, have an idea of what the truth is, and they want to tell it. And what makes someone laugh is important because that points the attention towards a problem that needs to be solved, or would rather, we would rather it be solved if it could be solved. But maybe it's not possible in whatever our restricted society is of resources and everything else. So I think that's a good point. I think comedy is certainly perhaps one of the most American things. We can, and that's the thing, we can poke fun at ourselves, and we can also poke fun at everyone else on the world. That's how we, that's how we do. That's how we do it.
Role that social satire plays in effective humor. Which brings us to our first case study.
Okay, this is interesting.
In my opinion, The Simpsons is not only the greatest show in the history of television, but the greatest piece of specifically American pop culture ever made. This is because The Simpsons is a show that only exists to tell stories of American life through distinctly American characters and settings and themes. Springfield might be a goofy place, but in many ways, it is still the most deliberately American place on television.
Yeah, I mean, Springfield is a generic American town, so that's totally fair to point out. I think perhaps, I don't know, I mean, it is one of the longest running animated series in American history, but perhaps in the beginning, I'm not sure, I haven't watched any of the recent stuff. I do remember, like, there was CBS or NBC, I don't remember or was it Fox? I don't quite remember. But back in the day, cable television, I'd see an occasional Simpsons episode, and I'd be like, that's some funny stuff there, and maybe a good point or two, and that kind of thing. But when you say, is it like particularly American culture? I mean, I guess you could make an argument for that. You certainly could.
Over the course of the incredible 30 years that it's been on the air, there is basically no aspect of American society or culture that The Simpsons has not satirized in some way. An interesting thing that I have found during my travels around the world is how often foreigners will be familiar with some American thing because they saw it on The Simpsons. So I'll be like, have you ever tried Sloppy Joe's? And they'll be like, no, but I think I saw it on The Simpsons once. I mean, after over 600 episodes, the show is basically the world's most
Shout out to Sloppy Joe's, by the way. Sloppy Joe's hits real good on a night where it's just like, I got nothing else. I got a pound of ground beef and a can of manwich, and that's all I need. Maybe a side of green beans and corn or something.
comprehensive encyclopedia.
Despite the probably health, I wouldn't eat it every day. I mean, that's not probably something you want to do, but on occasion, it's probably not bad.
Of Americana at this point. The Simpsons model has of course been copied by a number of other thematically similar American cartoons, like King of the Hill and South Park and Family Guy and Bob's Burgers and the rest. They are all just as aggressively
Animated
American in their
comedy
themes
shows
and settings. In fact, I know that a lot of people would argue that King of the Hill and South Park actually became quite a bit better than The Simpsons at satirizing American culture as the years went on. These sort of adult-focused cartoon sitcoms have all been super popular in America, but they have been famously hard to market in other countries just because of all of the American cultural knowledge you have to appreciate the jokes. Did you know they once tried to dub King of the Hill into French and turn it into a show about Quebec? Yeah, that went about as well as you might expect.
Ooh.
But I suspect that this is one of the reasons why American animation studios seem to have a lot more interest in making sort of fantasy-based cartoons these days, like Rick and Morty or Adventure Time. Although I guess BoJack Horseman is pretty American. So this is one of my most prized possessions.
It's
It is
probably
a complete
BoJack Horseman. I mean, that's a whole critique on Hollywood, everything of America, basically, the West Coast, and it's a pretty good show. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'd call it distinctly. I mean, I guess it's a distinctly American experience, but if not everyone can probably relate to it or understand it, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would call it like. I think it's kind of niche. It's a little niche for the American people. Maybe it's for an American audience, but not for the people. Like Simpsons. Simpsons is for everybody. Everybody gets made fun of. Everybody gets poked at. But you could watch BoJack from a place of like not knowing anything about Hollywood, and I guess you might get some of the stuff that goes on there, but you also probably would be like, huh? Is this how it really? I mean, okay. I mean, sure. Yeah. All right. I guess so. So, yeah.
Complete set of cards from the 90s era tabletop game Illuminati. A friend gave them to me for Christmas a while ago, knowing that I am very into this sort of thing. Illuminati is made by Steve Jackson, the guy behind the Munchkin series, if you're familiar with that.
I know that the Illuminati cards are like constantly put online on like, oh yeah, this predicted 9/11, this predicted the Pentagon, this predicted Trump, all these kinds of things, which is crazy to think about. And it's the same guy who made Munchkins? That's pretty wild. I remember playing Munchkins in the dorm room a couple times. Bad.
Where you are trying to take over the world by conquering all of these different subcultures in American society. As the game's name suggests, it is based on the popular Illuminati conspiracy theory, which holds that the guiding force behind all of the world's events is orchestrated by a secret shadowy elite. Now, this is unto itself a delightfully American premise for a game, because of course there is nothing more American than a good conspiracy theory. But what really makes
Ooh, that's a good point. There's nothing more American than a good conspiracy theory. I think that's actually true. It goes back to comedy and truth and seeking the truth and that kind of thing, trying to reach the best possible outcome. Because we don't take things necessarily as they are and just accept them, which a lot of cultures probably do. Just like that's the way it's always been, that's the way it's always going to be. Don't even bother trying to change it, don't even bother trying to question it, just go along with the program. I think that is a distinctly American thing, like conspiracy theories, conspiracy culture. And conspiracy theory is a prerogative, by the way, developed by the intelligence apparatus to basically say that anyone who we just disagree with and have don't want to have any platform, we can just give them that label. Luckily, in the past, 5 years, 4 years, that term is basically becoming more and more of like something you can just throw away, just like a racist or sexist or another pejorative of which you can put on people. And that's another thing. We use language all the time to label people, and labels are only as powerful as the power that you give them. You want to call someone a conspiracy theorist, and that person, is like, what if I have like a decent theory? Like, what is a scientist, right? Like, they're just a theorist. They're a theorist that has proven their stuff because they have the means available to prove the stuff. If there was disproving things, like information that was available to disprove something, then yeah, maybe then you could maybe go with someone being conspiracy theorist. But if you don't have all the information available, all you have is a theory. All you have is what you know and what you can work with. And if we don't have all the details and don't have all the evidence, then yeah. And there's nothing wrong with being a conspiracy theorist, by the way. It's as American as apple pie.
This game, a fantastic piece of American culture, is all of the individual cards.
Just to touch on that, like, conspiracy theory of like, what if like Benjamin Franklin and the founders were like, the crown is actually out to rule us and to take all our money and not give us any representation in government. And then all the British citizens were like, that's funny, you a conspiracy theorist. No, and then it's like, no, that's actually that's really what's happening. They don't want to give us any representation. They want to take our rights. They don't want to let us live how we would like to live, even though they're thousands of miles away across the sea. Would they be conspiracy theorists in that whole thing? I mean, it's a pejorative, and it's only, again, as much power as you give it. So.
Both the groups you're trying to conquer and all of the various items and status effects.
There it is.
Pretty much all of them feature some clever satirical reference to some aspect of 80s or 90s era American culture. Not just conspiracy theory culture, although there is a lot of that, with cards like Cattle Mutilators and Rosicrucians and the 18.5-minute gap. But there's also a lot of cards that just portray the sort of ugly fringe of American society in general, only lightly exaggerated, like Ditto Heads, or the Church of Violentology, or the Fred Birch Society, or the Nephews of God. And there are some shoutouts to some infamously wacky episodes, like Bite the Wax Tadpole, or Ketchup is a Vegetable. Now, a lot of this is relatively high-minded stuff, pretty deep dives into like American politics and religion and civic society in general. And unfortunately, in 2018, they rebooted and re-released the game, significantly simplifying or eliminating a lot of these cultural references in order to make the game more broadly accessible, particularly to...
I'm disgusted. I'm absolutely disgusted. What is this? Look at this. Look. And this is another like globalized thing right here to make it more broad audience. There's so much detail that you've lost here in this way that you've drawn things. When you go back to this, look how much detail is in this to this. It's just crazy. Like this is what do you get out of this? What do you get out of this? There's nothing like so particularly sinister or evil or something like hiding in the shadows about any of this imagery right here. So you're like, oh, it's all up front and good and dandy and haha, we just can laugh about conspiracy theories. It's nothing serious to ha. And then this is like actually there's some weird stuff out there. You should probably be concerned about that. You should probably be thinking like, how does this relate to me and my life and my experience and how I look at the world and government and policy and everything else that goes on in life. So yeah, this, no, don't even try and pass this off as like some creative piece of work, especially when you've already created this. That's just disingenuous. That's just to appeal to a modern audience, just because we can make more money off of not being as edgy. Amazing.
Cultural references in order to make the game more broadly accessible.
Especially when it's a game about the Illuminati. As something as edgy as the Illuminati, you try and profit off of that to a globalized audience. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous.
Particularly to younger players, which makes sense from a business perspective, but as a fan of American culture, it has really made me appreciate this all the more. As far as the most American video game goes, I have two picks. The first is a game that is in some ways quite thematically similar to Illuminati, and that is Sam and Max Hit the Road, a 1993 PC point-and-click adventure game made by LucasArts. I've heard that this game actually has quite a bit of a cult following in England, just because of how well it conforms to a certain romantic notion that some British people have of the United States. This idea of America as like this huge, colorful country full of all of these charmingly eccentric, hyper-individualistic people, each pursuing their own weird little dreams with stubborn earnestness, like the woman running the roadside stand of vegetables that look like celebrities. Next game I want to talk about is the Clay Fighter series, which is sort of a weird choice given that it has a bit more of a fantastical setting than some of the other things we've been talking about. The very good
Opinion disregarded. A boot. Yeah.
good, but I'm trying to do some cultural analysis here, not game review time with Jake Baldino. Anyway, the three Clay Fighter games are supposed to be a satire on the American fighting game craze of the 1990s, especially the Mortal Kombat series, which was a huge American cultural phenomenon in its own right. And as an additional gimmick, the games were all animated in claymation style, which was...
I'm just gonna like interject here. Like, I think it's interesting. I could let him finish his point, but I think for me, perhaps one of the most American video games, and I'm not sure if, like, I guess it depends. Like, can it be made by a foreign studio and still be considered an American video game? If it depicts American society particularly well or does something in a decent way? I think, for me, one of my favorite video games based in America might be LA Noire, just me personally, because it's so explorative of, like, American culture of the 1950s. And a lot of what we deal with today is also based on that. Anything that you get out of from the 1940s onward, after we won World War II, basically is just continued infinitum into today. And we've just degraded standards of what it is that we're supposed to expect from the people that we interact with. Like, go ahead. I mean, give yourself a, go talk with a car salesman. If you go to take a car salesman of the 1950s, and you do talk with a couple car salesmen in the game, if you take a car salesman of the 1950s, and then you bring them up to a car salesman of today, you'll probably find that they don't wear suits. They don't probably talk as fancy. It's pretty much all the same. There's really not much changing there. The cars are new. The cars are great, but maybe they got technological advancements and all that, but people haven't really changed all that much. So I know that was made by Team Bondi, which is an Australian company, which is not American, but also with Rockstar, which is American. So yeah, I mean, there you go. I wouldn't also call like GTA as an American game because, I mean, I suppose it takes place in American culture, but it's a very particular time. Like, they're very good at timepieces, very good at having timepieces as far as places to set characters and be. But I'm not sure GTA counts as the sole, quintessential piece of what America is. Like Grand Theft Auto 3 or Grand Theft Auto Vice City. I mean, all taken together, maybe you could cobble together like, yeah, these are some American kind of things. But I think Rockstar does that pretty well. That and oh man, I mean, Oregon Trail, those kinds of things. I know it's an educational experience, but again, there's a bit of like, you got to do some hard work and there's some education and learning along the way, because like that's what people who came here had to do. They had to learn, like, how does the world work? Like, what if I deal with like someone who died? It's kind of it's interesting. If I was gonna do like a fun educational like thing, I would say Oregon Trail, LA Noir, and that's all I could think of. But maybe I'll have some more points on that right now. But let's see how he gets Clay Fighter as the part of American culture. Let's see.
Was a kind of plasticine-based stop-motion animation.
I guess claymation. Yeah. Okay. I could see claymation is a uniquely American thing. I mean, that's like the way it's done, the way it's animated. Like Nightmare Before Christmas and all of those serials from the 1970s, Baz Rankin, Christmas movies, those kinds of things. It's a uniquely American thing to like take these figures and do stop motion and do it that way. So at least I think so. I don't believe it was developed before that. I could be wrong.
Clay Fighter games are just kind of a work of broad satire. The characters don't really have a lot of purpose behind them. They're basically just eclectic, goofy caricatures of various random things from American culture. So they're
okay. I kind of see where he's coming from. Like, we've got all these holidays and these things that are kind of distinctly American. And I guess, yeah, like Ichabod Crane and things like that. And I'm like, okay, I kind of see your point.
Reference. There's even this one guy called Kung Pao, who is a sort of racist caricature of a Bruce Lee type. Because it wouldn't truly be American without at least a little bit of casual racism, right? I really love this kind of randomness as a window into culture. When you try to come up with a big list of random things, what you wind up with is often a very big, satisfying clump of cultural in-jokes, like a big, satisfying clump of clay. Talk about two silly little songs. The first is Christmas is Interesting by Jonathan Colton, who is a very talented
is he the same
comedy
one that
music.
Did the Portal music? Is he the same one that did Still Alive?
For being
I'm gonna look that up. Yep, I was right. Yep, it was the guy. It was the same guy who did Still Alive. Code Monkey is also very good. I think that's actually, this is actually a pretty good pick. I think this and I mean, this kind of goes into the comedy, but Weird Al Yankovic is a distinctly American music choice. I don't know if you would find many other musicians who do parodies. Actually, I don't know if parody is a thing outside of the United States of music, but a distinctly American thing to make music and then parody it and then make different lyrics and put it to the same beat, but make different lyrics and like a different story of the whole thing that kind of just counteracts the whole original intention of the work. That's a distinctly American thing, to be kind of this argumentative kind of character and just give your perspective and be like, no, actually, Eminem is not about, shooting your shot. It's about sitting on the TV and watching music watching TV all day until your brain turns to mush, which is great. I think that's a really good point.
Being quite trite and cringy, but Jonathan
well, there
achieved
he brought it up. He brought up Weird Al Yankovic just right after. So okay, I'm not
that
totally
rare
lost.
feat of writing songs that are hilarious, but also good music that's worth listening to. Anyway, Christmas is Interesting is a very clever song because it basically just consists of a string of sort of non sequitur references to popular American Christmas-themed TV shows and stories. The joke is basically that a lot of the stuff in American Christmas-themed entertainment doesn't really seem all that Christmassy if you take it out of its original context. Like, just...
But this is where I don't know. I'll be a little like, is American culture just references? I'm not so sure American culture is just referential. Although it is probably a good part of what we are. Because the only way that we can actually grow or become something better or something newer is to reference the thing that made us have the thought in the first place. So I think that's an important point, that references are part of American culture, but I think there's also things that come out of that can be original and important, and not necessarily having to be having something that's come before. I mean, maybe it is true. Now I'm thinking about it. I mean, the whole American system based off of the British system, which Magna Carta and all the rest of it. All music is building upon itself in the American experience. You know, we just constantly improve and do things and move on things. But I guess, you know, it might not be a bad thing that we're just a referential culture, as long as we also respect the places where those things came from. I think that's probably where we lose a lot of sight of what is important to us, where we can just discount the whole original idea and maybe just make something new out of it. Like, I mean, you can't have Weird Al Yankovic, obviously, if you don't have any of the original artists that made great music. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of true. You know? So, good point. I thought about that.
So here is my two-part parting question for you. Americans. Can you think of another good example of a piece of American pop culture entertainment that is equally intensely American in the same ways some of this stuff is? Some movie or TV show or...
Film noir. Film noir, basically, I think is distinctly American. And again, it goes back to kind of like that Illuminati thing. Like, the truth is hidden in shadows and the world is a harsh place, but you gotta make do with what you got, and, you know, maybe bad guy might get away, but we still have someone who's questing after the importance of justice and all that kind of thing. And that's why, you know, also crime dramas are so popular in American, because again, we're a country of laws, we're a country of law and order, and that's what American culture is. I mean, law and order, and, you know, it's no surprise, it's a giant television series that people have watched for many years, because it taps directly into what is American culture. We deal with law and order every single day of our lives, you know, and the point, I suppose, is, does it become to the point of encumbersome or over encumbersome laws to establishing order? Is order can it be without laws? I think, you know, there's some of that to be said in, like, cases of that are put on the show, and then crime dramas and lawyer shows and all those kinds of things, which I think I would classify as distinctly American and probably in the American experience, and grew out of film noir. And like, if you think about, you know, one of the most famous American movies, 12 Angry Men, that's a distinctly American thing. It's about men who are on a jury and are almost a hung jury, and they have to decide the fate of one person, but then they finally turn this person to have justice. And then another one, which again quests after the idea of truth and honesty and bringing goodness to your home and your community and your locality, which would be Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Like, he becomes a senator, and he filibusters up there for hours and hours and hours on end as letters pour in from all over, and then there's this grift of corruption that's out to, like, pull children off their bikes and ram them off the road and stop this whole system of just terribleness that is going on in the United States of the Capitol, and to benefit the people at home of where they are. And I think that is perhaps one of the most distinctly American things, is that how we pursue and fight for justice. Like, what is justice? And in the past, I think we may have perverted justice a little bit by siding on the idea of social justice. And I don't think it probably was a bad thing at the time where we decided to pursue it, because there was probably some imbalance there that actually needed to be rebalanced. And I think that's an important point of American culture, is that we are a people that are seeking balance, and we are seeking truth, and we're seeking honesty in all of our facets of life, especially for those who work, for those who employ us, for those who employ Americans, for those who decide to enlist the services of American citizens. I think most people are pretty happy and content as long as you are being honest with them about what is actually occurring. And we can deal with that. Most Americans, I think, can deal with that, can be like, okay, you've said the situation, you've said what you're going to do about it, you've said, what you can do, what you can't do. I accept that, and I move on. And I will make my way, and I will do, and we will do, and that's how it works. But in lying to someone, you set up their expectations in a way that is just hard to recover from. Americans expect honesty. They expect truth, and they expect people to be on the side of goodness. And we have a truthful society. We have a society of trust that that was the way it was behaving. That was the way it was going for so long. And then we took that away in the service, in the fact that, again, meritocracy would be the way of which everyone would behave honestly and truthfully and above board, and we would tell each other the truth. We would tell each other how we actually feel about each other. And that's not the way that it is. That's not the way the system has behaved. And finally, there's a reckoning in American culture where we're leaning back towards law and order. We're leaning back towards really establishing ourselves as a prominent fighter for truth and justice. And maybe we'll see a resurgence of film noir. Maybe we'll see a resurgence of and further comedians, because maybe they've been scared for a while now. I mean, some of the more underground ones who have had opinions and things that they just haven't been able to say because they've just been heckled by those who want to stifle free speech. But I think that's what it is to be an American. And to have American culture is to be truthful, is to be honest, and is to be oriented towards the truth, towards a better tomorrow, and basing the better tomorrow on the circumstances that have been given to us by those who are within the halls of power, of which we can base our what is truthful, which is why Americans fight so hard. And I probably rambled on long enough, but and why, and I would say also, why did 9/11 hurt us so much? Why did Pearl Harbor hurt us so much? Why did that hurt us so much as a people? And why is it still so prominent in American psyche? Because there was an element of trust there that we gave someone the benefit of the doubt of, and they betrayed it. And I think those in power have learned, and they know that the American psyche, the American culture, is oriented towards crushing and rooting out dishonesty. And they don't want it focused inwardly. As they desperately, they want nothing aimed inwardly at what their schemes and what they have planned for the people, because they want to subdue them and make them focus all their righteousness on unrighteous causes of which they can propagate and say for themselves, and direct all of that anger, which is honest and just, and use it in an unjust and dishonest way. And as Americans, one thing we hate, one thing we dislike, one thing we do not like more than anything, I would say, is dishonesty in our culture, in our institutions, and to the people of which you are supposed to be responsible. That is.
And for foreigners, do you have an example of some piece of American entertainment that you have found confusing or alienating or off-putting just because of how specifically American it is? Something you look at and think, I just don't get this?
I do think that Americans have a culture that, if you are dedicated, if you are honest, if you are working, hardworking, and you are truthful about it, then you can become American. But you have to be dedicated towards truth. If you are dedicated to dishonesty, because that's how our institutions works, that's how trust works, that's how we built such a great society. If you are looking at something and just don't understand why truth is such a crucial factor in American society, it's because that's what we expect of our institutions. That's because that's the trust that was given to us by the founders, by the people that started the country, was that we were able to hold them accountable for their actions. And if you can't hold someone accountable, and you're not wanting to be held accountable, and you're not willing to do that introspection, look at yourself and be like, I messed up, I screwed up, I have a problem. If I don't have that conscious level, if I'm not at that level yet, I don't know if you can be American. I don't know if you can. I think that might be the distinguishing factor. I think that might be it. So yeah, that's my thoughts. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. God, it ended up being 53 minutes. I'm gonna have to probably cut it and edit it a little bit more and make it more entertaining. So we'll see when this one gets up. But I hope you guys have appreciated this, and I'll see what else we are working with. Just for fun, I just wanted to see how many views do we have. How many views? We have 582,000 views 4 years ago. 4 years. Let's just look at, some of them. Grand Theft Auto series is probably one of the greatest parodies of American culture. See? There you go. See, I didn't even look at the comments, but I think that's probably true. One of the biggest reasons our culture seems so bland is because most of our interesting quirks on a regional level. It's an interesting thing. I guess that could be true. Obviously, everyone makes fun of the South for being backwards or whatever. But, there's also things to be said about the Midwesterners and people on the West Coast and the Northeast. And yeah, I guess that's true. It's hard to understand those small things because we have those things with ourselves. Because, again, America's developed as a country that is basically multiple countries. That's how the states were originally designed, to be multiple countries and different regions and dialects. And of course, we're as big as we are, so we're going to have geographical differences. The Goonies and Sandlot are extremely American and very nostalgic for most Americans. I think that's true, but these, again, as I said before, and to counter Vivek's point, these are extremely American movies. These are 80s quintessential movies right here. One's about baseball, the other's about exploration, journeying, finding treasure, and then at the end they don't even get to keep it, most of it at all. What they get to keep is enough to keep their homes from being sold to a profit-driven real estate company wants to bulldoze it for a country club. think Malcolm in the Middle is a very underappreciated portrayal of American class, suburban middle American life. I haven't watched Malcolm in the Middle, but I would probably say that's probably true. I mean, you could also say, you know, Breaking Bad and Bryan Cranston and Better Call Saul are probably pretty good representations of American life in the non-drug stuff, you know, in the non-legalese kind of way. But I think all of that is, you know, because we all have our individual quirks, and the way that they talk to each other is very American. It's very relatable. So that's also true. The Fallout series used to be chock full of references to American esotericism and pop culture. I think that's also true. Fallout is also a great series, and he liked it as well. Animaniacs, okay, I could see that too. But yeah, all right. I think I've spent enough time on this, but you guys get the point. It is very interesting. It is very useful, I think, to try and develop this question of what an American is. And I think you probably have to have a certain level of consciousness in order for that to really honestly be the case. You have a point of self-awareness and consciousness and realizing what it is that you're striving towards, or what it is that you're actually working towards, and not just going through the motions. Americans don't just go through the motions. We work in many different ways to develop our own best lives. And with that, guys, that's where I'm going to end. All right, we're done. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Remember, please like, comment, subscribe if you guys enjoyed it. Remember, stay tuned for more stuff. And if you did enjoy it, I hope to see you again next time. I am the Human Advocate. I advocate for humans and for you. And I hope to see you again soon. And remember, stay human.